I am Rebecca, 32 years old, and until last month, I was living my dream as a sustainable farmer on 5 acres of land my grandfather left me. That Sunday brunch at my parents' house should have been ordinary. Instead, my father demanded I sign over my inheritance to my sister Allison. When I refused, I never imagined he would show up with a bulldozer destroying years of hard work while screaming that the land belonged to my sister now. If you are wondering how this family betrayal ended up in court, stick around. Before I begin my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories of family betrayal and justice. 5 years ago, I was drowning in corporate America. After graduating with my environmental science degree from the University of Washington, I took what seemed like the responsible path, a job with an environmental consulting firm in Seattle. The pay was good, but the work was soul-crushing. Day after day, I helped companies find ways to meet minimum environmental standards while maximizing profits. It felt like betraying everything I believed in. My grandfather Thomas understood my frustration better than anyone. He had been a farmer all his life, tending to 5 acres of the most fertile land in our county. Every weekend I would drive out to visit him. He taught me everything he knew about sustainable farming practices, soil health, and working with nature instead of against it. Those weekends became my sanctuary. The land knows what to do if you listen to it, he would tell me, as we walked through rows of vegetables. Most people try to force their will on the soil, but real farming is a conversation, not a lecture. When he was diagnosed with cancer, I took a leave of absence to care for him. Those 3 months changed my life. As his body weakened, our conversations deepened. He spoke about his legacy, and how he worried that his knowledge and land would be lost to development or industrial farming after he was gone. One evening, as the sun set over his fields, he took my hand. "Rebecca, I am leaving the farm to you, not your parents, not your sister. You. You understand what this land needs." I tried to argue that it should go to my parents or be split between my sister and me, but he was adamant. "Your parents have no interest in farming, and Allison, bless her heart, views land only as something to be exploited. You see it for what it is, a living thing to be nurtured." After he passed, the reading of the will confirmed his wishes. The 5 acres and farmhouse were mine, along with a small sum to help me get started. My parents seemed supportive at first. My father Bradley clapped me on the shoulder and said, "He always did see something special in you." My mother Marilyn hugged me and said she was proud. Even my sister Allison, 3 years younger than me, congratulated me, though her smile seemed forced. I quit my corporate job the following week. Everyone thought I was crazy to walk away from a secure position to become a farmer. Everyone except Diana, my best friend since college, who helped me move into the farmhouse and celebrated with champagne on my rickety porch that first night. To new beginnings, she had toasted, and to Thomas, who knew exactly what you needed. The first year was brutal. I made every mistake possible. Planted too early, overwatered, underwatered, lost crops to pests. I failed to identify in time, but slowly I learned. I converted the operation to fully organic practices, installed rain catchment systems, and built my first greenhouse to extend the growing season. By year 3, Harmony Fields Farm was breaking even. I sold at 3 farmers markets each week and had established relationships with 4 farm-to-table restaurants in the area. My specialty, heirloom tomatoes and rare herb varieties, were becoming known throughout the county. That was when I noticed the shift in my family dynamics. At first, their comments were subtle. "All this work for such small profits," my mother would say during family dinners. "You know that land would make a beautiful subdivision," my father once remarked, while helping me fix a broken fence. Meanwhile, my sister Allison bounced between business ventures. She tried opening a boutique that failed within 8 months. Then she invested in a friend's startup that went nowhere. She married Marcus, had twins, and seemed to blame me when money got tight for them. "If I had land to sell, our problems would be solved," she said pointedly at Christmas 2 years ago. I brushed off these comments, focusing instead on growing my business. I added beehives, planted an orchard of heritage apple varieties, and converted part of the barn into a small farm store, where locals could pick up fresh produce throughout the week. Last year, strange things started happening. Plants pulled up overnight, a section of irrigation pipes damaged. Nothing major, but concerning enough that Jacob, the farmer whose land bordered mine to the east, suggested I install security cameras. Better safe than sorry, he said, helping me mount the first 4 cameras around the property. Jacob had become a good friend and mentor, a 60-year-old widower who had been farming organically since before it was fashionable. He showed me how to repair equipment instead of replacing it, and shared rare seeds from his personal collection. The cameras seemed to stop the minor vandalism, and I threw myself into preparing for what promised to be my most profitable season yet. My greenhouse sheltered trays of seedlings. I had contracts with 6 restaurants and a waiting list for my community-supported agriculture program, where people prepaid for weekly produce boxes. Everything I had worked for was finally coming together. The farm was not just sustainable environmentally, but financially too. I could almost hear my grandfather saying, "See, the land provides if you listen to it." Then came that Sunday brunch, and everything changed. The morning of the brunch was unusually beautiful. Spring sunshine filtered through the apple trees just beginning to bloom, and I remember feeling optimistic as I harvested a basket of early spinach and radishes to bring to my parents. They had always appreciated fresh produce even if they did not understand my dedication to growing it. I arrived at their suburban home at 11:30, balancing the vegetable basket and a bottle of local apple cider. The house I grew up in looked immaculate as always. My mother Marilyn was obsessed with appearances, from her perfectly manicured lawn to her coordinated living room decor that changed with the seasons. "Rebecca, you are here," she said, opening the door. Something in her tone made me pause. Her smile seemed fixed, her eyes not meeting mine. She took the basket with barely a glance. "Lovely. I will put these in the kitchen." In the dining room, my father sat stiffly at the head of the table. Bradley Carson had built a successful real estate development business, and even in casual settings, he carried himself with authority. Today he barely nodded at me, focusing intently on his phone. My sister Allison was already seated with her husband Marcus. Their twin girls were apparently at a play date. Allison wore an expression I recognized from childhood, the same smug look she had when she knew something I did not. "Nice of you to join us, Farmer Brown," she said with a little laugh, still playing in the dirt. I ignored the jab used to her passive-aggressive comments. "The farm is doing great, actually. Just signed contracts with 2 new restaurants last week." "How quaint," she replied, sharing a look with our father. The brunch proceeded awkwardly. My mother fluttered around refilling coffee cups and pushing pastries nobody was eating. My father remained unusually quiet while Allison kept whispering to Marcus. The tension was palpable, but I could not identify its source. Finally, as my mother served dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Rebecca, we need to discuss something important. Something about the farm." I put down my fork, suddenly alert. "What about it?" "Your mother and I have been thinking," he continued, folding his hands on the table. "That land is wasted on just one person growing vegetables. Allison has children to think about, a family to provide for." I stared at him, not comprehending at first. "What are you saying exactly?" My mother jumped in, her voice overly sweet. "Darling, we think it would be best if you signed the property over to your sister. You can still have your little garden somewhere else. Maybe a community plot, but Allison needs a real asset for her children's future." The room seemed to tilt. "Sign over my farm. Grandfather left it to me specifically. I have built a business there. My whole life is on that land." "It is just not fair," Allison interjected. "You got a free 5-acre property while I got nothing, and you do not even have children to pass it on to." "That was Grandpa's choice," I said, my voice rising. "And I have not just been sitting on the land. I have worked every day for 5 years to build something meaningful there." My father's face hardened. "Your little hobby farm is charming, But Allison has a real estate developer interested in the property. They would build a beautiful subdivision. She could make enough to pay off their debts and set up college funds for the twins. You want me to give up my livelihood so she can sell the land to developers? I could not believe what I was hearing. That is exactly what Grandpa did not want to happen. My mother reached for my hand, which I pulled away. Rebecca, be reasonable. Family helps family. Allison has always had to settle for second best. This is your chance to be generous. I looked at my sister, who was not even trying to hide her triumph now. How long have you been planning this? Marcus spoke for the first time. The developer approached us a few months ago. It is an incredible opportunity. The land is worth 3 times what it was when your grandfather owned it, thanks to the new highway access. So this is about money. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly. I am not signing over my farm. Not now, not ever. That land means everything to me. My father stood too, his face flushing red. You are being selfish. Your sister deserves this chance. Deserves my inheritance, my business, my home. I was shouting now, something I rarely did. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing when he left the land to me. He knew I would protect it, not sell it to the highest bidder. That was when my father said the words that would echo in my mind for weeks to come. You will sign those papers, Rebecca. One way or another, that land will go to someone who appreciates its real value. You will do this for your sister, or you will regret it. The threat hung in the air. My mother gasped, Bradley, but did not contradict him. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. I cannot believe you would even ask this of me, let alone threaten me. Stay away from my property. As I reached my car, Allison followed me out. You have always been the favorite, she hissed. Always so perfect, so special. Grandpa's little farmer girl. Some of us have real responsibilities, real problems. But you would not understand that in your privileged little bubble. I drove home in a dazed, tears blurring my vision. The moment I arrived, I called Diana. They want me to. What, she exclaimed after I explained. That is insane. They cannot force you to give up your property. My father seemed to think otherwise, I said, still shaking. The way he threatened me, I have never seen him like that. Diana's voice turned serious. Rebecca, you need to be careful. Document everything from now on. Save any texts or emails they send you. If you feel unsafe, call the police. They are my family, I protested weakly. Family are not threats or threats, she replied. And installing those security cameras last year was probably smarter than you realized. I hung up and walked my property line, looking at the seedlings in my greenhouse, the beehives, the young orchard. Everything I had built with my own hands. Everything my grandfather had entrusted to me. I would not give it up. Not for Allison, not for anyone. What I did not know then was just how far my family would go to take what they believed they deserved. The week following the brunch was a nightmare. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members who had apparently been briefed on a version of events that cast me as the villain. How can you be so selfish? Texted my Aunt Patricia. Your sister has children to think about, wrote my cousin Stephen. Your grandfather would be ashamed, claimed an uncle I barely spoke to. My mother called daily, her approach oscillating between guilt trips and sweet talking. Your father did not mean to sound threatening, she insisted during one call. He is just concerned about Allison's future. The twins need security. You always were the stronger one, Rebecca. The one who could take care of herself. I remained firm. Mom, I am not discussing this anymore. The farm is mine. Grandfather left it to me for a reason. But surely he would want to help his great-grandchildren if he were alive today, she pressed. What he would want is for his land to remain a farm, not be turned into another cookie-cutter subdivision, I replied, before ending the call. On Wednesday, I spotted Allison's blue SUV, driving slowly past my property. She did not stop or wave, just cruised, by looking intently at my fields and buildings. The next day, I saw her again, this time with Marcus, in the passenger seat. They pulled over briefly near my driveway, took some photos, and drove off. Unsettled, I called Jacob to tell him what was happening. "Sounds like they are planning something," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Want me to come over and help you check those security cameras? Might want to make sure they are all working properly." Jacob arrived an hour later with tools and some additional cameras. "These are motion activated and will send alerts to your phone," he explained, as we installed them at vulnerable points around the property. "Better coverage of the greenhouse and equipment barn too." That afternoon, I called Taylor, an attorney I had consulted, when setting up my business license. After explaining the situation, she agreed to meet the next day. "Family disputes over land can get ugly," she warned me. "Bring any documentation you have regarding the inheritance and your business operations. And if there have been any explicit threats, we should discuss a restraining order." I spent that evening gathering papers. My grandfather's lawyer had given me property tax records, business licenses, and income statements, proving the farm was a legitimate, profitable business and not a hobby, as my father had dismissively called it. Friday morning brought an unpleasant encounter at the Greenwood grocery, where I was delivering my weekly herb orders. Allison appeared suddenly in the produce section, pushing a cart with deliberate casualness. "Fancy seeing you here," she said, eyeing the display of my labeled herbs. The store owner was setting up, still playing farmer. "What do you want, Allison?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She examined her manicured nails. "Just shopping. And thinking about how much better this store would look with a proper commercial supplier, instead of hobby farmers taking up shelf space." "The owner seems happy with my products," I replied. "Customers specifically ask for them." Her smile turned cold. "For now, things change, Rebecca. People move on. Properties change hands. Nothing lasts forever." Before I could respond, she leaned closer. "You know Dad always gets what he wants." "Always. Why not make this easy on yourself?" She walked away, leaving me shaken. On the drive home, I noticed a white envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. Inside was a computer-printed note. "Smart farmers know when to harvest and when to sell the farm." No signature, but the message was clear enough. I photographed it before carefully placing it in a folder with other documentation. Saturday morning, I woke to find my mailbox had been knocked over. Tire tracks in the mud suggested someone had deliberately driven into it. I photographed the damage, then set about repairing it. As I worked, Jacob drove up. "Trouble?" he asked, eyeing the damaged mailbox. "Just the beginning, I think," I replied, showing him the note from yesterday. He frowned deeply. "Rebecca, I do not like this. Why not stay at my guest house for a few days, just until things calm down?" I shook my head. I cannot leave the farm unattended. Besides, running away would only embolden them. "Then I am staying over tonight," he insisted. "I will sleep on your couch. These kinds of situations can escalate quickly." I almost refused, but remembered Diana's words about taking threats seriously. "Okay, thank you." We spent the day checking fences and security cameras. Jacob helped me move some of my most valuable equipment into the locked barn, just in case, he said grimly. That night, after Jacob left to get overnight things from his house, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. The beauty of my land at dusk usually brought me peace, but tonight anxiety gnawed at me. How had a simple inheritance turned my family against me, so completely? Why could not they see that this land was not just property to me, but my passion, my purpose? I did not know then that the worst was yet to come, that my father's determination to get his way would destroy years of work in a single morning. But as I looked out over my fields, a sense of foreboding settled over me, heavy as storm clouds on the horizon. The sound of heavy machinery ripped me from sleep just after dawn on Sunday. At first, in my groggy state, I thought it was Jacob arriving with his tractor to help with the spring tilling we had planned. But as consciousness fully returned, I realized this was something else entirely, a louder, more aggressive engine sound. I threw on clothes and ran outside barefoot, phone in hand. What I saw, stopped me cold. A yellow bulldozer was cutting a destructive path through my east field, tearing up rows of early spring crops and irrigation lines. Behind the controls sat my father, his face contorted with determination. Nearby, Allison leaned against her SUV, filming with her phone, a satisfied smile on her face. "Dad, stop!" I screamed, running toward the devastation. "What are you doing? Stop!" He either could not hear me over the engine or chose to ignore me. The bulldozer continued its path of destruction, now heading toward my greenhouse. 5 years of carefully cultivated soil organic certification requirements, specialized irrigation, all being ripped apart before my eyes. I ran closer, waving frantically. "Stop! This is my property. You have no right." My father finally noticed me. Instead of stopping, he shouted back, his voice carrying over the engine noise. "This land belongs to your sister now. You had your chance to do this, the easy way." The bulldozer plowed into my greenhouse, the structure collapsing with a sickening crack of breaking wood and tearing plastic. Thousands of seedlings representing months of work and the bulk of my summer crop income were crushed in seconds. "Are you insane?" I screamed, moving dangerously close to the machine. "You are destroying everything." My father revved the engine, swinging the bulldozer toward my herb garden. "You brought this on yourself. Your sister deserves this land more than you do." As he approached the beehives, I realized he was beyond reason. I backed away, hands shaking so badly, I could barely dial 911 on my phone. 911. "What is your emergency?" came the dispatcher's voice. "My father is destroying my farm with a bulldozer," I said, my voice breaking. 523 River Road. "Please hurry. He is destroying everything." As I spoke, I remembered the security cameras. Every moment of this attack was being recorded. I opened the camera app on my phone and began taking additional footage myself, documenting the destruction as tears streamed down my face. The bulldozer crushed 2 beehives, sending angry swarms into the air. I watched in horror as my father continued his rampage, now targeting the small orchard of heritage apple trees I had planted 3 years ago. Each tree represented hours of care, years of anticipated harvests, gone in seconds. "This land belongs to your sister now," he kept shouting. "This is what happens when you defy your family." Allison remained by her car, still filming occasionally, shouting encouragement to our father. "The equipment shed next, Dad. That is where she keeps all her expensive stuff." I could not believe this was happening. These people were my family, yet they were systematically destroying not just my property, but my livelihood, my passion, my connection to my grandfather. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Jacob arrived before the police, his truck skidding to a halt on the gravel driveway. He took in the scene with horror. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, moving protectively to my side. "My father," I managed through tears. "He is destroying everything." Jacob started toward the bulldozer, but I grabbed his arm. "Do not. He is not rational right now. The police are coming." As if on cue, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. 4 officers emerged initially, looking confused at the scene before them. "That is him on the bulldozer," I told the first officer who approached. "Bradley Carson. My father. He is destroying my farm. I own this property, not him." My father saw the police and finally stopped the bulldozer. He climbed down, red-faced, but suddenly composed, straightening his jacket as if he had just stepped out of a business meeting. "Officers," he said confidently, "there seems to be a misunderstanding. This is a family matter regarding property that should rightfully belong to my younger daughter." One officer looked skeptically from my father to the path of destruction. "Sir, did you cause this damage?" "As I said, this is a family dispute over property," my father repeated smoothly. "I have the deed," I interjected, my voice steadier now. "This land is legally mine, inherited from my grandfather, and I have everything on camera." That got their attention. "You have video of this incident?" the officer asked. I nodded. pulling up the security camera feeds on my phone. Multiple angles. And the cameras recorded audio too. The officers huddled around my phone watching footage of my father, explicitly stating his intentions while destroying my property. His face fell as he realized his actions had been recorded. "She set me up," he sputtered, pointing accusingly at me. "She provoked this." "The video shows you arriving unannounced at 6:15 this morning and immediately beginning to destroy crops," the officer stated flatly. "There is no evidence of provocation." Allison had approached now, her own phone tucked away. "This is ridiculous. We were just trying to reclaim family property that should have gone to all of us, not just her." "Do you have any documentation supporting your claim to this land?" the officer asked her. She faltered. "Well, no, but morally." "Morals do not factor into property law. The officer cut her off. "Mr. Carson, please put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for criminal damage to property, trespassing, and potentially assault if your daughter wishes to press charges for coming at her with that bulldozer." "This is outrageous," my father shouted as they handcuffed him. "Do you know who I am in this community?" "Someone who just caused about $100,000 in property damage from the looks of it," the officer replied coolly. All caught on camera. As they led my father to the police car, Allison turned on me. "Are you happy now? You have always wanted to turn everyone against us. Against me." "I did not drive a bulldozer through your livelihood," I said quietly. "Please leave my property before I ask the officers to arrest you for trespassing too." After they took my father away, and Allison reluctantly departed, I stood in the middle of my destroyed farm with Jacob beside me. 5 years of work lay in ruins around us. The greenhouse was flattened, irrigation systems torn up, crops destroyed, beehives smashed. Even my grandfather's old tractor had been damaged. "I do not understand," I whispered, surveying the devastation. "How could they do this? We are family." Jacob put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Family or not, what they did was wrong. But we will rebuild, Rebecca. Your community will help you. This is not the end." As the morning sun rose higher, illuminating the full extent of the destruction, I felt something harden within me. This was not just about land anymore. This was about standing up for myself against people who would destroy what I loved out of greed and entitlement, even if those people were my own blood. I would rebuild, and I would make sure justice was served. The day after the attack, I walked the property at dawn, cataloging the destruction in the gentle morning light. It was somehow worse than it had appeared in the chaos of the previous day. Nearly 80% of my crops were destroyed. The greenhouse was beyond repair. 2 beehives completely demolished, a third damaged but possibly salvageable. The heritage apple orchard, 20 trees I had nurtured from saplings, was reduced to splintered trunks. The irrigation system would need to be completely redesigned and reinstalled. I took photos methodically documenting each area of damage for insurance and legal purposes. By 8:30, Jacob arrived with coffee and a determination that lifted my spirits slightly. "I made some calls," he said, handing me a steaming cup. "People want to help." By 10, the first volunteers appeared. 3 farmers from the local Organic Growers Association, then a group from the farmers market where I sold my produce. By noon, there were 20 people on my property, cleaning debris, salvaging what crops could be saved, and offering support. Sarah from River Creek Farm brought seedlings to replace some of what I had lost. Michael from Highland Apiaries came to help relocate the surviving bees. Even Chef Anthony from Harvest Table Restaurant arrived with food for the volunteers, and a promise that he would still honor our contract even with reduced deliveries. "We will work with whatever you can provide," he assured me. "And I have talked to the other chefs. Everyone understands and wants to support you." Their kindness nearly broke me. I had built more than a farm here. I had built a community. As we worked through the day, Taylor, my attorney, called with an update. "Your father is being charged with criminal mischief in the first-degree trespassing and malicious destruction of property," she informed me. Given the dollar amount of damage and the premeditated nature of the attack, these are serious charges. The district attorney is taking this case personally. What about Allison? I asked. She was there encouraging him. We are looking at accomplice charges, Taylor confirmed. The video evidence is compelling. She clearly knew what was planned and participated by directing your father toward specific targets on the property. After hanging up, I rejoined the cleanup efforts, working alongside people who had become friends over the years. By evening, we had cleared the major debris and salvaged what could be saved. But the reality was stark. My business was crippled for the season, possibly longer. As everyone left, Diana arrived, having driven straight from the airport after cutting her business trip short. "Oh, Becca," she gasped, seeing the devastation. "This is even worse than you described." We sat on my porch steps as the sun set, sharing a bottle of wine and the pizza someone had delivered for the volunteers. I keep trying to understand why, I said, my voice hollow. Why would they destroy what I have built instead of just being happy for me? Diana squeezed my hand. Some people cannot stand to see others succeed, especially at something they did not approve of. You're leaving corporate America, choosing a different path. It challenged their worldview. But to this extent, to criminal destruction. Your father has always been about control, Diana reminded me gently. You defied him by choosing your own path. Then your grandfather validated that choice with the inheritance. Double defiance. The next morning I met with my insurance adjuster, who looked grim as he surveyed the damage. Your policy covers vandalism, he confirmed. But given the extent of the damage and the unusual circumstances, the claim will take time to process. We are talking about a major loss here. Later that week, I discovered something that shed new light on my family's desperation. While meeting with Taylor to prepare for the upcoming court hearings, she suggested we investigate my sister and father's financial situations. People do not typically resort to destruction over land unless there are serious financial motivations, she explained. Especially given your father's position in the community, this behavior suggests desperation. Through legal channels, we discovered that Allison and Marcus were not just in debt, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. 3 failed business ventures, a mortgage they could barely afford, and significant credit card debt had them teetering on financial collapse. More surprisingly, my father's real estate development company was struggling too. 2 recent projects had failed to secure permits, investors were pulling out, and there were rumors of questionable financial practices that had attracted attention from regulatory agencies. The land was their Hail Mary, Taylor concluded. With the new highway access, your 5 acres could be worth millions to developers, enough to solve both their financial problems. That evening, as I sat with Diana reviewing what we had learned, my mother called. I almost did not answer, but Diana encouraged me to hear what she had to say. "Rebecca," my mother began, her voice small. "I had no idea what your father was planning. You have to believe me." "You knew enough," I replied coldly. "You were part of the ambush at Brunch. You tried to manipulate me into giving up my inheritance." "I never thought he would resort to violence," she insisted. "Please drop the charges. For the family's sake, your father could go to prison." "He should have thought of that before he destroyed my livelihood," I said. "This is not something I can just forgive and forget, Mom. This is my life he tried to destroy." "He is still your father," she pleaded. "A father who would drive a bulldozer through his daughter's business is not much of a father at all," I replied, before ending the call. The following day brought another discovery. While organizing papers for the case, I found documents my grandfather had left me that I had never fully examined. Among them was a letter addressed to my father, dated shortly before my grandfather's death. "Bradley," it read, "I know you have always had designs on my land for your developments. I know you have promised portions to Allison over the years. This stops now. The land goes to Rebecca, because she will protect it as I have. This is not negotiable, and any attempt to circumvent my wishes will reveal truths about the Carson family that none of us want public. Leave Rebecca and her inheritance alone." I brought the letter to Taylor immediately. What truths do you think he was referring to? She scanned the document thoughtfully. Hard to say, but it suggests your grandfather anticipated resistance to his decision. It also implies he had leverage over your father. This could be useful. As the court date approached, I threw myself into preparation. Taylor and I gathered all evidence, security footage, photographs of damage, financial records, proving the farm's value as a business, the history of harassment leading up to the attack, and testimony from witnesses who had seen my father's rampage. The night before the preliminary hearing, I broke down, sitting alone in my kitchen looking at photos of the farm as it had been before the destruction. Grief finally overwhelmed me. I sobbed until I had no tears left, mourning not just the physical loss but the death of my family relationships. No matter the legal outcome, things would never be the same between us. Diana found me there, having let herself in with the spare key. Without a word, she sat beside me and held me until the storm passed. I am scared, I finally admitted. What if the justice system fails? What if they somehow get away with this? They will not, she said firmly. The evidence is overwhelming, and regardless of what happens in court, you will rebuild. You are the strongest person I know, Rebecca. This will not break you. As I finally drifted off to sleep that night, I clung to her words. I would face my family in court tomorrow. I would stand up for myself and for my grandfather's legacy. And whatever the outcome, I would find a way forward. The county courthouse was an imposing limestone building that had stood in the center of town for over a century. I had passed it countless times, but never imagined I would enter it to face my own father in a criminal proceeding. Diana drove me there as my hands were shaking too badly to safely operate a vehicle. Jacob met us on the courthouse steps, along with several other farmers and community members who had come to show support. You are not alone in this, Jacob reminded me, his weathered hand steadying on my shoulder. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I expected, with dark wood paneling and stern portraits of former judges lining the walls. My father sat at the defense table with his attorney Richard Montgomery, one of the most expensive lawyers in the county. He did not turn when I entered. Allison was seated in the front row behind him, dressed conservatively in a navy blue dress that concealed her usual flashy style. She shot me a venomous glance before returning her attention to her phone. Taylor guided me to our table, where Assistant District Attorney Melissa Wilson was already arranging documents. She was a compact woman, with silver-streaked dark hair, and the focused energy of someone who thrived on complex cases. Rebecca, good morning, she greeted me. Are you ready for this? I nodded, not trusting my voice just yet. The evidence is solid, she assured me. Judge Lancaster is fair but strict. He does not tolerate property crimes, and he particularly dislikes cases where people take the law into their own hands. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Lancaster entered, a tall man with a permanent furrow between his brows. After preliminary matters were addressed, Ada Wilson opened with a clear statement of the case. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of premeditated property destruction. The defendant, Bradley Carson, deliberately and maliciously used heavy machinery to destroy crops, structures, and equipment on land legally owned by his daughter Rebecca Carson. The entire incident was captured on security cameras, and the defendant can clearly be heard stating his intentions to transfer ownership of the property to his other daughter Allison by force. The damage exceeds $150,000 and represents the destruction of a legitimate agricultural business. My father's attorney countered with what seemed like a desperate defense. Your Honor, this is fundamentally a family misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion. Mr. Carson believed he had a legitimate claim to input on the property, which was family land for generations before the recent inheritance. He acted out of frustration after his daughter refused reasonable family discussion about the property's future. Judge Lancaster's expression made it clear he was not impressed. Frustration is slamming a door, Mr. Montgomery. Renting a bulldozer and destroying crops is something else entirely. The security footage was played in court, the large monitor displaying multiple angles of my father's rampage. The audio was painfully clear. "This land belongs to your sister now. You had your chance to do this, the easy way. Your sister deserves this land more than you do. This is what happens when you defy your family." I watched the judge's face darken as the footage continued. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Allison seemed to shrink in her seat as her voice came through the speakers directing our father toward the expensive equipment. When the footage ended, there was silence in the courtroom until Judge Lancaster spoke. "Mr. Carson, these are serious charges with substantial evidence. How do you plead?" My father stood. "Not guilty by reason of temporary emotional distress, Your Honor." Judge Lancaster's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Montgomery, are you certain this is the plea you wish to enter? The evidence I have just seen shows clear premeditation, not a momentary lapse." Montgomery conferred briefly with my father before addressing the court again. "Your Honor, we would like to request a brief recess to consult further with my client." "Granted. 15 minutes. When court resumed, my father's demeanor had changed. He looked defeated, the arrogance drained from his posture. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change his plea to guilty of criminal mischief in the first degree, with a request for leniency in sentencing." The judge nodded. "The court accepts the change of plea. We will proceed to testimony relevant to sentencing considerations." I was called to testify, first describing the farm's history, its value as a business, and the impact of the destruction. Taylor guided me through presenting financial records, proving the farm's legitimacy and profitability. And prior to the incident, Taylor asked had there been other concerning behaviors from the defendants. I described the tense brunch, the drive-bys, the threatening note, and the damaged mailbox. As I spoke, I noticed my mother slip into the back of the courtroom, her face pale. Cross-examination was brief, with Montgomery trying unsuccessfully to characterize the farm as a hobby project rather than a legitimate business. Then came a surprise witness, Arthur Peterson, my grandfather's attorney. "Mr. Peterson," Ada Wilson began, "you handled Thomas Carson's estate, correct?" "I did," the elderly attorney confirmed, "and I have known the Carson family for nearly 40 years. Was there anything unusual about Thomas Carson's decision to leave the farm specifically to his granddaughter Rebecca?" Peterson adjusted his glasses. "Thomas was quite explicit about his wishes. He specifically excluded Bradley and Allison from inheriting the farm property because he feared they would sell it for development. He had refused multiple offers from Bradley over the years to purchase the land for that purpose." "Did Thomas Carson ever express concerns about potential interference with his wishes after his death?" "Yes," Peterson replied firmly. "He anticipated resistance. That is why we installed specific clauses in the will, making it virtually contest-proof, and why he left certain insurance documents with me." "Insurance documents?" Wilson asked. "Thomas provided me with documentation regarding some of Bradley's business practices that he felt would discourage any challenge to his will. I was authorized to release this information only if his wishes regarding the farm were contested." My father stood abruptly. "This is irrelevant to the current charges." "Sit down, Mr. Carson," Judge Lancaster ordered sharply. "Mr. Peterson, please continue." Peterson looked directly at my father. Thomas documented several instances where Bradley Carson had engaged in permit fraud, tax evasion, and improper land rezoning practices through his development company. He gathered this evidence as protection for Rebecca's inheritance. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. My father's face had gone white. Even his attorney looked shocked. "I have those documents here," Peterson continued, patting his briefcase. "Thomas hoped they would never be needed. But given recent events, I believe releasing them serves his original intent to protect his granddaughter and the farm." After several more witnesses, including Jacob, testifying about the community value of my farm, and an agricultural expert assessing the damage, my father was called to testify. Under questioning from the ADA, he initially maintained his position that the land should have been family property. But as questioning continued, and the judge's patience visibly thinned, something in my father seemed to break. "Why did you really destroy your daughter's farm?" Mr. Carson Wilson pressed. "Was it really about family fairness? Or was it about development potential and solving your financial problems?" My father looked at me directly for the first time. "It was supposed to be mine," he said, his voice suddenly tired. "That land. My father promised it to me for years. Then he changed his will without warning. I had plans. Commitments to investors based on eventually developing that property." "So this was about money," Wilson stated. "It was about what was promised to me," he insisted. "What should have been mine to pass to whichever child I chose. And when your father made a different choice, you decided to take matters into your own hands, rather than respect his wishes." He did not answer directly. I lost control. Seeing her succeed on that land when my own business was failing, knowing what that property could be worth with proper development, I convinced myself she was being selfish. "So you destroyed her livelihood." "I did not think it through," he admitted. "I just wanted to force a resolution." After my father stepped down, Allison was called to testify. She attempted to portray herself as merely present during the incident, rather than an active participant, but crumbled when the footage of her directing our father toward specific targets was replayed. "Were you aware of your father's plan before that morning?" Wilson asked. "I knew he was going to do something to make a point," she admitted reluctantly. "And you chose to participate rather than try to stop him or warn your sister." "She has everything," Allison suddenly burst out. "The golden child with the perfect inheritance. Do you know what it is? Like living in her shadow. Always second best. Dad promised me that land would solve our problems. The developer was going to pay $2 million. My financial problems would be over." Her outburst seemed to stun even her own attorney. The judge called for order as Allison dissolved into tears. After closing statements, Judge Lancaster delivered his ruling. "Bradley Carson, the court finds you guilty of criminal mischief in the first degree, a Class C felony. The premeditated nature of this crime, the dollar value of the damage, and the betrayal of family trust make this a particularly disturbing case." He sentenced my father to 5 years probation, restitution of all damages, 200 hours of community service at agricultural properties, and a 30-day jail sentence. Normally, property crimes of this nature might not include incarceration for a first offense, the judge explained, but the vindictive and calculated nature of this destruction merits time for reflection. Allison was charged as an accomplice and sentenced to probation, community service, and partial restitution. As the court adjourned, my mother approached me tentatively in the hallway. "Rebecca, I had no idea it would go this far," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Your father told me he was just going to talk to you again." I looked at this woman who had stood by while my father threatened me, who had tried to manipulate me into giving up my inheritance, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "I need time, Mom," I said simply. "This is not something I can just move past." Outside the courthouse, surrounded by friends who had become more like family than my actual relatives, I took my first deep breath in weeks. The legal battle was over. Now the real work of rebuilding could begin. 6 months after the court hearing, I stood in my partially restored fields watching volunteers plant a new row of apple saplings. The farm looked different now. Some areas still showed scars from the destruction, but new growth was everywhere. The community response had been overwhelming. A local fundraiser organized by Jacob and Diana had raised nearly $40,000 toward rebuilding. Farmers from 3 counties had donated seedlings, equipment, time, and labor. Even businesses in town had contributed, recognizing the value of supporting local agriculture. "How does it feel?" Jacob asked, joining me by the new greenhouse, a structure twice the size of my original one, thanks to upgraded insurance and community contributions. "Bittersweet," I admitted. "I am grateful for the support, but I still catch myself looking over my shoulder expecting another attack." The emotional healing had been slower than the physical rebuilding. I had started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal and establish healthier boundaries. The hardest lesson had been accepting that family relationships should not come at the cost of self-respect. My father served his 30 days in jail and had since made no attempt to contact me. Through my mother, I learned he had sold his development company and was moving to Arizona. Part of me was relieved. Another part mourned the relationship we would never have. Allison had taken a different path. 3 months after the hearing, she had left a handwritten letter in my mailbox. "I cannot expect forgiveness," she had written, "but I want you to know that I am getting help for the jealousy and resentment that has poisoned my life. What happened was inexcusable, and I will spend years making amends if you ever allow me the chance." I had not responded yet. Perhaps someday I would, but the wounds were still too fresh. My mother called weekly, respecting my boundaries, but clearly hoping for eventual reconciliation. Our conversations remained brief and superficial, but the fact that I answered at all was progress of a sort. The business had changed too. With the original crop plan destroyed, I had pivoted to focus more on the farm store educational programs and value-added products. The silver lining was that these adjustments had actually increased my profit margins, making the business more resilient. Jacob and I had formed a formal partnership combining our expertise and resources. At 65, he had been considering retirement but found renewed purpose in our collaboration. We had expanded into specialty herb production for local distilleries and restaurants, a niche market with excellent returns. "You know what your grandfather would say about all this," Jacob remarked as we watched the volunteers work. "The land always finds a way to heal," I replied, quoting Thomas's favorite saying. Exactly. And so do people. That evening, I hosted a thank you dinner for the core group of supporters who had stood by me through everything. Diana flew in from Seattle. Chef Anthony brought incredible food. Taylor took a rare evening away from her caseload. And a dozen farmers and community members gathered around tables set up in the new barn. As I looked around at these people who had become my chosen family, I realized how much stronger these bonds were than the ones I had been born into. These people had shown up when it mattered most, expecting nothing in return. "I want to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To community, to resilience, and to the unexpected gifts that sometimes come disguised as disasters." The following week, I launched a new initiative that had been forming in my mind since the court hearing, the Thomas Carson Sustainable Farming Scholarship. Using a portion of the restitution money, I established a fund to help young farmers learn organic and sustainable practices. "Your grandfather would be proud," Arthur Peterson told me when I invited him to sit on the scholarship committee. "He always said you understood the true value of the land." As the first anniversary of the destruction approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. The farm was flourishing again, differently but vibrantly. I had established boundaries that protected my well-being. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from a publisher interested in my story. They had heard about the case and thought it might make a compelling book about family dynamics, land ethics, and resilience. After consideration, I agreed to the project, seeing it as an opportunity to help others facing similar conflicts. "The land teaches us that destruction is often followed by remarkable growth," I wrote in the draft introduction. "What appears to be an ending can become the soil from which something new and stronger emerges." The most profound lesson I had learned was that standing your ground, even against family, is sometimes the most self-respectful choice you can make. My grandfather had recognized something in me, that my parents never had a connection to the land and its rhythms that transcended financial calculations. By honoring his faith in me, by refusing to surrender what I had built, I had not only preserved his legacy, but created my own. The farm was no longer just Grandpa's land, but truly mine, shaped by my vision and resilience. Diana summed it up perfectly during her last visit. "Some people will try to bulldoze your dreams. The trick is to plant them deep enough that the roots survive." As I walk my property today, I still see scars from that terrible morning. But alongside them, I see new growth, stronger systems, and a clearer vision of the future. Sometimes, standing your ground means losing the battle, but ultimately winning something far more valuable: your self-respect and the knowledge that you remained true to your values when it mattered most. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family pressure? Did you regret it, or did it lead to unexpected growth? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately set us free. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the most important inheritance is not land or money, but the courage to live according to your own values.